On February 1st, a senior official from the U.S. Department of Defense stated that the U.S. was tracking a high-altitude object overflying the continental United States. This object was noticed over Montana, social media, and then media in general went ablaze. How did it get here? Why is it still up there? And what is the U.S. government going to do about it? What even is that thing? After traversing the continental U.S. and off the coast of South Carolina, it became the first target to be shot down by an F-22 Raptor. A historic achievement that has left everyone asking more and more questions. Some of these questions would be answered even before the shootdown occurred. This object was a Chinese spy balloon, according to the Department of Defense, and it had been tracked from its launch in Hainan Island to its flight following wind patterns up through Alaska, down through Canada, and into Montana. While this report made clear that these objects aren't alien spaceships, they didn't answer a number of other questions. These questions would continue to mount as another object was shot down off the coast of Alaska just a few days later, another over Canada a day after that, and yet another over Lake Huron shortly thereafter. With each shoot down, details would continue to be limited, leading to widespread speculation on what these objects are and why they're being shot down. Are these UFOs that happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, or are they more a Chinese spy balloon? According to the Department of Defense, the first balloon, as well as what could include the others that were shot down, and that's not including the balloon that was spotted over Latin America and several parts of East Asia, were Chinese spy balloons that were part of a larger spying program by the People's Liberation Army. As uncovered by the Washington Post, this program has allowed China to overfly countries of interest to their national security objectives, which include, among others, Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, Vietnam, India, and more. In fact, it's been reported that these balloons have overflown 5 different continents. According to some officials, these balloons are tracked and have been tracked for a number of years. Having said that, they've also said that a lot of this discovery has been retroactive, meaning that this most recent balloon and the onboard technology has helped officials to understand more about this program. Being that this has been a retroactive discovery process, it would make some sense that officials in the past, when asked about this program, didn't realize that these incursions were happening at all, as at the time, these objects weren't tied to any known Chinese surveillance program, a point that the Washington Post makes in this article. This is a pretty clever strategy for high-altitude surveillance. Balloons, being cheap, also lack the radar signature that a normal aircraft like, say, a spy plane would have. They also can climb an extremely high altitude. The balloon that overflew the US was reported to have flown around an altitude of 60,000 feet. For context, the majority of aircraft can't even fly that high. They're also incredibly cheap. It's easy enough for China to strap up surveillance equipment and communications equipment to a balloon and let it fly over some areas of interest where they can take pictures and videos before it flies away. This also has some issues which we've witnessed play out very publicly. Since these balloons have no ability to steer or propel themselves, they float where the wind takes them, and if that happens to be over the continental United States where everyone has a cell phone and likes to share things on the internet, that may not be a great outcome. China quickly learned this the hard way, as Secretary of State Antony Blinken canceled a scheduled meeting to China hours before his plane was scheduled to take off, and the US would summon China's ambassador. China did apologize for their mistake, saying that they didn't intend for the balloon to fly over the US. However, they said that it was a weather balloon and not a spy balloon. This keeps tensions between the US and China in a rocky place, to say the least. So what is on these balloons and why is it such a big deal? According to the Post, these balloons have some cameras capable of high-resolution imagery, as well as signals equipment that can allow the balloons to communicate with a satellite. This may mean that these balloons were flying around, taking pictures and video, and then uploading that data to a satellite that acts as a data relay, which forwards the imagery over to China for analysis. This is, of course, just speculation. Okay, so these balloons are part of a Chinese surveillance program that takes images of ground targets for intelligence purposes, and some of them happen to veer off course, and now it's becoming a big deal because, well, why? And this is an interesting point, and one that I'm not so sure about. It could be that it was the first major incursion into the United States. However, there have been other instances that have occurred where balloons have crashed or been spotted by Hawaii, Texas, Florida, and Guam. It could also be that it was kept relatively quiet until it was noticed by the public, at which point the story took a life of its own and is now part of a bigger political battle. Take your pick, but ultimately it still doesn't put China in a comfortable position. On February 16th, President Biden gave a speech offering more information about this situation. The 3 other objects shot down over Alaska, Canada, and Lake Huron don't yet appear to be tied to the PLA surveillance program, and may just be civilian balloons from non-nefarious groups like private or public organizations serving legitimate purposes. The president stated these objects were caught as a result of the recalibration of NORAD's detection capabilities, which makes a lot of sense. Anyone that's ever worked an incident response job knows that their roles live and die by what they tether their alerts to, and in this case, the alerts were so sensitive that they could pick up a random balloon. This leaves me with a funny thought of some second grade class sending up a weather balloon with their local news station as part of a class project, only to have it shot down by an F-16. Pretty dramatic. As a precaution and a process moving forward to prevent shooting down other non-malicious second grade balloons, President Biden announced that they will be establishing a better inventory of what aircraft is in NORAD's airspace and keeping it updated, improving measures to catch unmanned objects, update rules and regulations for sending unmanned objects up into NORAD airspace, and the Secretary of State Anthony Blinken will lead a push for better global norms around how to regulate these objects in airspace. President Biden also ran through a timeline in his justification of why the shootdown didn't happen until it was off the coast. And this is a point that has been made from the moment that this balloon was publicly acknowledged to this very moment, and yet it remains, for some reason, politically controversial. This balloon was large, and according to the DoD, it was 3 bus lengths in width. While shooting it down before it entered US airspace in Alaska would have prevented this whole saga from reaching this current temperature, it may have also denied the US the ability to analyze a balloon and learn more about its capabilities and purpose. This knowledge has been crucial, as we've mentioned in this video, in allowing the US to learn more about China's balloon surveillance program. If the shootdown occurred over land, its wreckage could not be controlled, and the estimate that was publicly released was that the wreckage could span over 3 miles. To avoid damage to civilian infrastructure and life on the ground, they waited until it was over an ocean. This is a rational decision, and while the argument against waiting was that it could collect information on sensitive sites inside the United States, I think it still holds up. You can obfuscate your ground footprint from aerial reconnaissance, as has been a practice since balloons were first invented. One famous example was the balloon army in England shortly before D-Day that tricked the Germans on where the D-Day landings would ultimately take place. It's also important to remember the alternative. If someone had been killed by the wreckage, this saga would have heated even further than it has so far. China may be seeking better relations with the US. The withdrawal of the US chip manufacturing expertise from China has been a major talking point, and with the war in Ukraine weakening China's primary foreign ally, Russia, they may want to cool things down a notch, and this does the opposite of that. So then why use balloons at all? We've talked about the surveillance benefit a little, but why not just use a satellite where you don't have rednecks snapping pictures of you snapping pictures of them? Back to the Post article, General Charlie Moore, who's had an extensive career with the Air Force, serving with NORAD for some time, says it plainly. Satellites can only take a picture for a moment before their orbit moves them off target. A balloon, however, can stay on target for hours on end, weather permitting, and that ability to loiter on target can yield immense value if you're watching, say, an airbase, where you can watch the way an airbase conducts its day. That said, they do have very clear downsides, which we've talked about and you've probably seen yourself. On a list of pros and cons, where the pros are the benefits of this level of surveillance, and the cons are potentially deepening the rift between you and your greatest rival, while you're already dealing with crises, I don't know that many folks would have opted to continue this program. Heck, we may see China curb this program after this debacle, if not at least quietly put it under some additional oversight and maybe change of command. Mistakes do happen, even by China, and this has no doubt been an interesting saga to watch play out. Thank you for watching. I currently have some polls on the community tab that if you would be so kind as to check that out, I'd love to get your feedback. These polls include whether or not I will do live streams on weekly roundups on events, or at the very least a weekly roundup of the war in Ukraine, and it also includes a poll on channel memberships. I'd love to get your feedback, so jump on there, let me know, say something in the comments, and I will see you all next time.